The studio was silent long before the cameras rolled. A low hum from the overhead lights trembled through the air, faint but sharp enough to cut into the nerves of anyone waiting to speak. 2 chairs, 1 table, and a truth that had waited years to find a voice. Rihanna walked in like she always did, calm, radiant, collected, but her eyes held that unmistakable distance of someone who's learned to perform strength. Her heels echoed on the floor like a countdown. Somewhere in that rhythm, she already knew this interview would not end gently. Oprah rose to greet her, a measured smile, warm but loaded. This wasn't a celebrity interview, it was a reckoning. The audience wasn't there to watch a pop star, they were there to watch a confession. For years, Rihanna had spoken in lyrics, not sentences. Every song, every music video, every public appearance was a puzzle piece in a story that began the night everything broke. The world had watched her fall in love, watched her get hurt, and then watched her rise again. Sharper, colder, but never unscarred. Now, here she was, face to face with Oprah Winfrey, a woman who didn't ask questions to entertain. She asked them to dissect. The first minutes were soft. Oprah's voice, deliberate and smooth, glided through topics like success, fame, and resilience. Rihanna smiled through them, her words careful, rehearsed, but sincere. She spoke about growth, healing, reinvention. Then Oprah leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly, the signal of a pivot. Do you still love him? The question hung there, not as sound, but as an aftershock. Rihanna froze. Not visibly, but internally something stopped moving. You could almost hear the air shift. A faint gasp from someone behind a camera, a throat clearing from a producer who suddenly regretted not warning her this early. She smiled, that same practiced, polite smile every star learns to wear, but it cracked, almost imperceptibly. That's complicated, she said softly. Theological wasn't enough to describe what flashed behind her eyes. Memories, the photographs, the silence, the apology tour that never healed anything. Oprah didn't flinch. She leaned forward, slow, unblinking. Complicated how? Rihanna's shoulders rose, a breath caught somewhere in her chest, the kind that burns before it escapes. People don't understand what it's like to love someone who hurt you, she whispered, and hate them for it at the same time. For a second, the world disappeared. No cameras, no lights, no control. Just 2 women sitting across from each other, one trying to pull truth, the other trying to survive it. Did you forgive him? Oprah asked next. It wasn't just a question, it was a blade. Rihanna looked down, her hands clenched in her lap. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let them break. I had to, she said, for me. But it didn't sound like closure. It sounded like a confession she hadn't rehearsed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was suffocating, the kind that screams louder than words ever could. And somewhere in that silence, Oprah pressed again. Would you take him back if you could? The air went still. Even Oprah seemed to realize, too late, that the line had shifted, that she'd stepped into something raw, unhealed, dangerous. Rihanna's eyes met hers. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. Why would you ask me that? Her tone was soft, but every syllable carried years of restraint. Interviews endured, headlines weaponized. I think people want to understand, Oprah said. No, Rihanna replied. They want to judge. The words landed like glass on concrete, sharp, final. A producer signaled off camera. Too late. The moment was already alive, pulsing, uncontainable. Rihanna's jaw tightened. The warmth in her eyes vanished. She looked past Oprah, past the cameras, past everyone. Then she stood. Maybe this was a mistake. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The quiet authority in those 5 words was louder than any storm. She turned, walked off camera, and the echo of her heels filled the studio like the sound of something breaking. Not glass, not furniture, but illusion. Oprah sat still, caught between empathy and disbelief. Her own silence suddenly heavier than the question that caused it. The cameras kept rolling, unsure whether to cut or capture. For the first time in years, the world would soon see Rihanna not as a headline, not as a survivor, but as a woman reclaiming her voice in real time. The room was still vibrating when the doors closed behind her. The walkout had begun. Backstage, the air was colder. Cameras hummed behind the curtain, capturing nothing but the ghost of what had just happened. Rihanna stood alone near the dressing room mirror, the reflection staring back like an accusation. Her face was flawless under the makeup lights, but her eyes betrayed her, trembling on the edge of something she refused to name. Anger, shame, maybe both. Behind her, a producer whispered into a headset, "She's off set. Yeah, I think we lost her." No one moved closer. Not yet. The tension was too raw, too electric. She ran her hands through her hair, took a long breath, and exhaled through clenched teeth. "They always do this," she muttered. "They say they want to talk about healing, but what they really want..." Her voice broke off. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Everyone in that hallway knew exactly what she meant. Meanwhile, on set, Oprah hadn't moved. Her hands were folded neatly on her lap, her gaze locked on the empty chair opposite her. The chair still carried the warmth of the person who'd been sitting there seconds ago, a ghost of conversation cut short. The crew avoided eye contact. No one dared to say it out loud. The interview that was supposed to be about redemption had just turned into confrontation. But Oprah wasn't finished. She leaned toward her producer and whispered, "Let her breathe. Don't chase her. She knew better than anyone. Silence reveals more than questions ever could." Behind stage, Rihanna's breathing steadied. She stared at her reflection, studying the woman she'd become. The global icon who could sell out arenas. The business mogul. The survivor. But under the armor, there was still that girl from Barbados who'd trusted too deeply once. Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost like she was talking to her reflection. They don't see the whole story. They never do. Someone knocked softly on the door. "Rihanna?" She didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway, and one of Oprah's producers, calm, gentle, stepped inside. "We can cut that part out if you want," she said. "You don't have to go back in there." Rihanna turned, her face unreadable. "No, that's not how I do things." The producer hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah," she said, straightening her shoulders. "If she wants truth, I'll give it to her, but it's gonna be my truth." Back on set, the studio audience, small, hand-picked, hushed, waited in uneasy silence. Oprah's expression was still soft, but behind the calm was calculation. She wasn't chasing ratings, she was chasing answers. But even she hadn't expected the question to draw blood. When Rihanna finally reappeared, the entire room held its breath. She walked back to her chair, slow, deliberate, like someone walking back into the fire just to prove she could stand the heat. Oprah gave a quiet nod, respectful, grateful, but cautious. "I didn't mean to upset you," she said gently. Rihanna looked her dead in the eye. "You didn't upset me. You just reminded me how the world works." A long silence followed, the kind that makes you feel every heartbeat. Oprah leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Then tell me how it works." Rihanna took a deep breath. "You make mistakes in front of the whole world and they never let you move on. You try to forgive yourself, but every time you sit in this chair, every interview, every headline, it's like starting over, like I'm still 19. Oprah nodded slowly. "That's a heavy thing to carry." "Yeah," Rihanna said, her voice trembling just slightly. "And everyone wants to be the one to ask the question that breaks you." It wasn't an accusation. It was a truth too clean to ignore. Oprah's eyes softened. "You're not broken. Maybe not anymore," Rihanna said, "but you can't heal in a world that keeps replaying your pain." Air between them thickened again. Not anger this time, but mutual recognition. Two women who understood the cost of being seen. Oprah exhaled. "So why come here? Why sit in this chair at all?" Rihanna looked down, a faint, weary smile. curving her lips. Because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. The answer landed heavy, quiet. It wasn't for the audience. It wasn't even for Oprah. It was for herself. For a few moments, the tension eased. The cameras rolled silently, capturing something far more human than scandal. The ache beneath survival. Then Oprah, always chasing the truth just one layer deeper, asked softly, "If he were watching this right now, what would you say to him?" The room froze again. Rihanna's face went still, too still. You could almost feel her pulse change. "Nothing," she said finally. "Some things don't deserve words anymore." And for the first time in her career, Oprah didn't ask another question. She just looked at her guest, the woman who had learned to live inside her silence. The moment was raw, real, almost sacred. But what no one knew was that another storm was already forming beneath the calm, one that would shatter whatever fragile peace the two women had just built. The air shifted again. Not loud, not sudden, but enough for everyone to feel it. That invisible tension that comes when truth gets too close to something sacred. Rihanna sat back in her chair, eyes sharp, guarded. Oprah, ever composed, adjusted her notes. The showrunner gave a subtle signal. Keep rolling. The cameras obeyed, hungry for what came next. Oprah began softly. "You've said before that forgiveness was part of your healing. But is there still anger?" Rihanna hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her armrest. "Anger's tricky. It hides in the things you don't say." "Like what?" "Like the fact that every time I try to talk about music, someone brings up that night. Like my whole career is a footnote to someone else's mistake." Her voice cracked slightly, a whisper sharpened by exhaustion. "I built an empire," she continued. "I created something from nothing. But they still call me the girl from that story. You think I don't hear it? I do. Every time." Or leaned in. "You know they call you a survivor." Rihanna's laugh was low, bitter. "Yeah, but survivors don't get to rest. People want the trauma, not the person who made it through." That line hit Oprah harder than she expected. She blinked, regrouped. "So what do you want them to see?" Rihanna's eyes locked onto hers, unflinching, powerful. "I want them to see I'm not a victim. I'm not his past. I'm not yours to dissect." The audience was silent. You could feel the studio shrinking around them, the space between the two women now holding something raw and electric. Oprah, a master of control, didn't back down. "But don't you think people ask because they care?" Rihanna smiled coldly. "Caring doesn't look like interrogation." There it was, the spark. The unspoken line had been crossed again. Oprah's tone changed, softer but edged. "You know, sometimes honesty comes from discomfort. And I think your fans," Rihanna interrupted. "My fans don't need you to translate my pain for them." The sentence cut through the room like thunder. Even Oprah's seasoned calm wavered for a second. Behind the camera, a producer mouthed, "Cut." Another shook their head. They couldn't, not now, not while this was real. Oprah adjusted her bracelet, the gesture of someone trying to ground herself. "I'm not your enemy, Rihanna." "I know," Rihanna said quietly. "But right now, you sound like everyone who ever wanted to turn my story into theirs." The words hung like smoke. The air was thick with history, of women being misunderstood, of power meeting defiance, of truth colliding with expectation. Neither spoke. The only sound was Rihanna's slow breathing. Then, Oprah, in that deceptively calm tone, asked the question that detonated everything. If you could go back, would you still love him? It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sensational, but it was fatal. Rihanna froze. The muscles in her jaw tightened. Her eyes, which had been steady all this time, flickered with something volatile, something she hadn't let anyone see in years. "You really want to go there?" she said, voice low, almost trembling. Oprah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rihanna looked away, then back at her, the tension boiling into something too big for words. "You don't understand what you're asking. You're not asking about love. You're asking me to reopen something I've buried." "Maybe that's how healing finishes," Oprah offered gently. Rihanna's stare turned sharp. "Or maybe that's how it starts bleeding again." The silence that followed was deafening. A crew member shifted. Someone coughed. Rihanna stood abruptly. The chair scraped the floor. Loud, final. Oprah straightened, startled but steady. "You're not walking out again, are you?" she asked softly. Rihanna's eyes glistened. "You think walking out means I'm weak. But sometimes leaving is the only power I have left." She turned and started toward the exit. The camera followed instinctively, but no one dared to speak. "Rihanna," Oprah began, voice breaking the stillness. Rihanna paused at the doorway, half turned, the lights glinting against unshed tears. "You wanted honesty. That's it." And she was gone again. The studio dissolved into chaos, quiet chaos, the kind where no one knows whether to chase or retreat. Oprah sat still, her eyes wet, her face pale under the studio lights. This wasn't about ratings anymore. It was about two women, both powerful, both wounded, colliding under the weight of what the world expected them to say. Backstage, Rihanna leaned against the wall, breathing hard. A single tear slipped down, smudging her makeup. She wiped it away, furious. "Never again," she whispered. "Never again." But the thing about confrontation, it doesn't end when someone leaves the room. It lingers, echoing in the silence left behind. And this silence was far from over. Because Oprah, relentless in pursuit of truth, was already on her way backstage. The corridor outside the studio was quiet. Too quiet. The faint hum of studio lights faded behind closed doors as Rihanna stood in the dim backstage glow, her heartbeat still echoing from the confrontation. Somewhere down the hall, Oprah's heels clicked. Slow. Deliberate. The kind of pace that meant she wasn't chasing, but she wasn't letting go either. Rihanna leaned against the wall, her eyes closed. She could still feel the sting of the last question burning through her mind. Would you still love him? It wasn't a question about the past. It was an accusation disguised as empathy. Oprah stepped through, careful, measured. For a woman known for her composure, she looked human. Shaken, but steady. "Rihanna," she said softly. "Can we talk?" Rihanna didn't answer. Her arms were crossed, her jaw set, the familiar armor sliding back into place. "I crossed a line," Oprah said, voice low. "And I know it." Rihanna's eyes flickered toward her, then away again. "You don't have to apologize for doing your job." "That's not what this was," Oprah replied. "That was me asking a woman to relive her worst moment. And that's not the kind of truth anyone owes the world." The words hung heavy. They didn't fix it, but they made the silence less cruel. Rihanna exhaled slowly. "You know what it feels like, though, right? Having people peel you apart on TV, pretending it's healing? Oprah nodded, her voice trembling slightly. More times than I can count. For the first time, Rihanna looked her in the eye. And for a split second, the walls between them cracked. Two women who'd been publicly dissected, privately misunderstood. Oprah stepped closer. You don't have to go back out there. Rihanna smiled faintly, not from amusement, but defiance. If I don't, it'll just become another story they twist. Rihanna storms out on Oprah. You know how it goes. Oprah sighed. They'll write it anyway. Then let them, Rihanna said. But I'll make sure they see why. With that, she turned back toward the set. The studio was still in partial chaos. Producers whispering, lights dimmed, audience murmuring nervously. When Rihanna re-entered, all movement stopped. Oprah followed behind her, slower this time, like she was walking into confession. Rihanna sat down first. Same chair, same posture. Different energy. The audience didn't clap. No one did. The silence was its own kind of respect. Oprah sat across from her again, her voice softer than before. You didn't have to come back. I know, Rihanna said, but I'm tired of running from my own story. Shimmer zoomed slightly, though neither of them seemed aware of
it anymore. Rihanna leaned forward. You wanted to talk about forgiveness. Fine. But forgiveness isn't a headline. It's work. It's every morning you wake up and decide not to hate yourself for surviving. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. She didn't try to hide it. I thought I was healed, she continued. But maybe I just got good at pretending. Pretending I'm fine. Pretending the world's moved on. Oprah listened, eyes glistening. You know what no one ever asks? Rihanna said. They ask if I forgave him. No one asks if I forgave myself. The audience held collectively, a breath everyone had been holding without realizing. Oprah's voice wavered. Have you? Rihanna paused. Some days yes, some days not even close. It wasn't a performance anymore. It wasn't even an interview. It was a confession said aloud so she could stop carrying it alone. Oprah reached out slowly. You don't owe the world your pain, Rihanna. You never did. Rihanna nodded, tears forming but held back. Then why does it still feel like the only thing they want from me? The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but sacred. A single tear rolled down Rihanna's cheek. She wiped it away, this time without shame. People think walking out means weakness, she whispered. But sometimes it's the only way to stop being defined by the thing that broke you. Oprah leaned in, voice almost a whisper. And walking back in? That's me taking it back. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt different now, not combative, but fragile, raw, human. The audience began to breathe again. Cameras steadied. The storm had passed, or so they thought. Because as the conversation turned toward closure, one last question, quiet, almost unintentional, would undo everything. Do you think, Oprah said softly, you'll ever love again the way you loved him? Rihanna's expression changed. The light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something deeper. Exhaustion, pain, disbelief. You just couldn't help yourself, huh? She said quietly. Oprah froze. Rihanna stood once more, this time slower, quieter, but more final. I came back for honesty, not for this. Her voice cracked, then steadied. You want closure? Here it is. I don't owe anyone my heartbreak anymore. She turned away. This time there was no hesitation, no pause, no second glance. Her footsteps echoed through the studio like thunder rolling away from a storm that had finally burned itself out. The cameras kept rolling, but all that remained on screen was an empty chair and Oprah's reflection in the table glass, blurred by the tears she didn't wipe away. Outside, the door shut softly behind Rihanna. And that sound, that soft, unremarkable sound, was louder than anything she'd ever sung. The world would see the clip within hours, the walkout, the silence, the unanswered
Question. But what they wouldn't see was the truth behind it. The way Rihanna stood outside in the night air, trembling, not from anger, but from release. The studio lights still glowed behind her, casting long shadows that stretched like ghosts on the pavement. She looked back once, at the doors, at the stage where she'd bared her soul, then forward, into the dark. Sometimes endings don't come with applause. They come with silence. And that's enough. Inside, Oprah sat in the empty studio, hands folded, replaying every word. The chair across from her still faced forward, empty but alive with everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't. Rihanna didn't walk away from the interview. She walked toward herself, toward peace, toward boundaries, toward a truth the world couldn't edit or twist. Because forgiveness isn't cinematic. It isn't loud. It's walking away before you lose yourself trying to explain. That night, headlines would scream, "Rihanna walks out on Oprah." But those who listened closely knew it wasn't a walkout. It was a reclamation. As the credits rolled and the screen faded to black, her final words still echoed through the silence. Sometimes walking away isn't quitting. It's remembering who you were before the noise. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more raw cinematic deep dives into the real human moments behind celebrity headlines, where fame fades, but truth remains. Like, share, and comment what you think. Was Rihanna's walkout defiance or freedom? Your voice shapes the next story.